In our last video, we discussed understanding the prompt. And what we did is we analyzed the prompt. You may recall that the prompt was, count the number of prime numbers less than a non-negative number n. So, in order to think about what kinds of problems have we seen like this before, what we need to do is remember, what is our key action that we're going to be doing? What's that middle part to our problem? In the middle part, what we need to do is find the number of prime numbers less than the input. And so for that, there's going to be a bunch of different key parts, right? What kinds of operations are involved in prime numbers? Now, if you haven't seen a problem like this before, I want to stress that that's totally fine, because that's actually what this course is about. It's giving you a chance to practice with some of the most common problems that we have to solve, and so that you have a chance to kind of look back on this course whenever you're in the future trying to match back to problems you've already solved in the past. So to ask ourselves, how do we identify what the key components of this are so that I can match to other problems? We have to ask, what kind of operations have I dealt with prime numbers? One of the key operations we have to do is determine whether or not a number is prime. So if you don't remember what makes a number is prime if it's not divisible by any other number except 1 in itself. So what we need to do is think about, how do we know that a number is not divisible by a bunch of other numbers, right? A bunch of numbers less than itself. So that's like the key problem. Now, if you remember doing this in school, you may remember that you had to do this a lot by hand, out on paper, right? You would write down a number, and then you would manually divide it by 2, by 3, by 4, etc., until you determined that there was no other divisor for this number, and then you could mark it as prime. That's what I remember doing at school, at least. Another problem I remember in school was finding the prime factors, where I would take a number and then divide it by a bunch of prime numbers to determine what prime numbers could be multiplied to make this number. So those are some operations that you might remember from school. You might also remember that it was helpful to keep track of what prime numbers you found and saw. So just knowing that these components are out there, you don't have to solve for each one of these problems individually yet. You just have to recognize maybe you've seen the solution to this problem before. Maybe you've been introduced to it. Maybe on paper, right? And so you just want to think back to times when you've experienced solving the same problem. Not necessarily solving the same coding problem, but just the problem itself. Isolating the problem to not a coding problem can really help you as we move into the plan phase. Because what we need to do is be able to do this problem ourselves in our own minds in order to make a plan. And that's why the match phase is so crucial. You have to think about, how would you solve it? And often that means relying on a time when someone taught you to solve it when you were younger. So that's the match phase.